Let's Talk Consent. And tonight we're going to be talking about, if you could advance the slide, please, a number of different topics, including sexual assault, consent, bystander intervention, how to help a friend, and what community resources are available to all of you. It's really important this evening that you take care of yourself. Smitha?
So yes, hello everybody. My name is Smitha Varia. I am the program manager for the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. And of course, this evening, we are going to be talking about violence and abuse and assault. We will be talking about some scenarios and going through what sexual assault and consent means. And of course, that can be very hard to hear and talk about. So if you need to talk to somebody, please do not hesitate to call the Victim Assistance in Sexual Assault Prevention 24-hour hotline at 240-777-4357. Again, that's on the screen, 240-777-4357. And I will also be putting this number in the chat. Thank you. In addition, I know that all of you will be happy to know that your participation today will earn you 2.5 SSL hours for attending. We will be sharing the form at the end of this webinar, so you do have to stay on for the full 2 hours. The form will go to a Google form where you will have to answer some reflective questions, and this form will need to be filled out by tomorrow at 5 p.m. If you turn it in after tomorrow at 5 p.m., you will not earn the SSL hours. If you do attend a private school, please email me. My email is on the screen, smitha.varia@montgomerycountymd.gov to earn your SSL hours. I'll be sharing all this information again at the end, and all participants will be getting an email after the webinar is over with this information as well.
And so now I sort of skipped in a bunch of different orders as we're trying to resolve the spotlight issue. And we apologize again that we're sort of trying to figure this out as we go, but in the interest of time, we're gonna just keep talking and hoping that the ASL interpreter is still visible to those that need it. And that the others can see the individuals who are speaking. If not, I'm going to introduce you to some people who you're going to hear their voices later on in this program. So as I said, my name is Debbie Feinstein, and it's my privilege to be the chair of the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council for Montgomery County and the chair of the Choose Respect Initiative. My day job is I work for the State's Attorney's Office for State's Attorney John McCarthy, and I am chief of his Special Victims Division. My division is responsible for prosecuting sexual assault cases, as well as domestic violence cases, child abuse, and some other areas of crime. It's my privilege this evening to be on this panel with my colleagues, including Captain Amy Dahm, who is the director of the Montgomery County Police Special Victims Investigation Division. She's been with the department since 2003 and has served in a variety of positions, including as a detective in internal affairs and in the 1st, 3rd, and 5th districts. Dr. Rafia Prince is a supervisory therapist with Montgomery County's Trauma Services through Health and Human Services, which includes the county's Rape Crisis Center and the Victim Assistance in Sexual Assault Program. In addition, Dr. Prince is the co-chair of the Montgomery County Sexual Assault Response Team and the staff liaison for the Victim Services Advisory Board. Colleen Bachman is also a supervisory therapist with Montgomery County's Trauma Services. She's a member of the Montgomery County Divorce and Family Law Roundtable and chair of the Roundtable's Racial Equity Committee. She also serves on a work group within the Domestic Violence Collaboration Council focused on the impact of domestic violence on children. And as Smitha indicated earlier, Smitha Varia is the program manager of the Montgomery County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council. In this capacity, she manages initiatives to make sure that victims and offenders are getting the services that they need, and she conducts trainings and workshops around the county to spread awareness about domestic and dating violence. As I indicated, it's our pleasure to be here this evening, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation. We're going to have a presentation that's going to begin in a couple of moments where Smitha and I will be presenting information on the topics that we described a few moments ago, and then we'll go to our Q&A around 8 o'clock this evening. Some of you may have submitted questions in advance, and some of you may be putting questions in as we speak into the Q&A. As Smitha indicated, you will have the QR code for your SSL hours at the end of the evening. When we do these presentations, we often get a lot of questions about SSL hours. So please make sure to stay tuned, and that QR code will become available to you if you're with MCPS. And if you're with a private school, you can email the address that we'll provide. We've already provided, and we'll provide again at the end of the presentation. So please keep other questions coming, and we look forward to addressing them a little bit later. Smitha?
Great, thank you. And I do see in the question and answer that some people are unable to hear us right now. Please make sure your volume is turned all the way up, and hopefully your sound will resolve. So I wanted to start us off with talking a little bit about some myths and facts about sexual assault and rape. So I want you all, as we go through these, to think about what your answer is. You don't have to chat in your answer, but just think in your mind what you think that answer might be. So the first one is sexual assaults are committed by strangers. Do you think this is true or false? I'm hoping that most of you thought that this is false, and that 7 out of 10 victims of rape actually know the perpetrator. We will be mentioning later the statistics where most people are assaulted by either an acquaintance or a family member. Men can be raped too. This is definitely a myth, right? So men can be raped as well. 1 out of every 10 rapes is when the victim is a male or male-bodied. What someone wears or what they had to drink makes them responsible for sexual assault. I hope that you all answered this as false. Sexual assault is never the victim's fault, no matter what they are wearing, what they are doing, what they are drinking, or anything. Sexual assault victims have bruises or cuts or physical injury. A lot of times we think that a sexual assault can be a brutal attack. However, this is false. A sexual assault can occur without visible physical injury. And we'll talk a little bit more about that during the presentation. And lastly, victims of sexual assault handle the assault and the aftermath in different ways. It automatically gave you the answer there, which is true. Responses may be different from what might be expected. We're not going to go into detail a little bit about too much into this today, but everybody responds to sexual assault in a different way. The way their brain reacts, the way their body reacts, and there's no right way to handle an assault and the aftermath.
We're going to share a few statistics with you this evening, which may surprise some of you and may not surprise some of you. You may or may not be aware that 6.7% of high school students reported that they were physically forced to have sexual intercourse. If you look at the graph in front of you, you can see the breakdown by boys and girls. I'm just going to say now, so that you'll understand during the course of this evening, that a lot of the studies and statistics have centered around individuals that identify as boys and individuals that identify as girls. There have not been as many studies about, or not really any studies that we've been able to find that specifically do this kind of breakdown for transgender students. We are going to be speaking a little bit later about some of the LGBTQA plus issues around sexual assault. But I did want to note that some of the slides and some of the information are going to refer to boys and girls, because that's the statistical information that is out there. And we're hoping that the fields are going to evolve and that we're going to learn more, as we move forward in terms of, and that more data is going to be gathered. So I wanted to make sure to share that information. So you can see that really that statistically there's a number of girls and a number of boys in you know, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade that have been physically forced to have sexual intercourse or raped. Next slide, please. So who commits sexual violence against youth? Of the sexual abuse cases that are reported to law enforcement, 93% of the juvenile victims, or the victims under the age of 18, knew the perpetrator. 59% were acquaintances, 34% were family members, and 7% were strangers to the victim. So what does this tell us? This tells us that a lot of the situations where there are individuals that are raped actually knew the person that had raped them, either an acquaintance or a family member, and that stranger rape is a lot less prevalent than the other types of rape. And that's why this discussion around consent and sexual assault becomes so important, because sexual assault can happen in situations where you may know the person, but may not know what, sort of what's coming next and what this evening may turn into and that sort of thing. So we're going to be sharing some thoughts on that as well. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the effects of sexual violence on young people are pretty significant. They include things like doing poorly in school, engaging in sexually risky behavior, getting pregnant, self-harm, which may include attempting or considering suicide, the development of mental health conditions, which may include post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse, eating disorders, low self-esteem, depression, and anxiety. And there's also a statistical correlation between individuals who are sexually abused or assaulted as children and individuals who are abused as adults. All of these things are obviously of great concern, and one of the reasons that we are here tonight, and one of the reasons that we want to get out in front of this issue. I mentioned earlier that I'm a prosecutor, so we get cases after the rape has happened, after the sexual assault has happened, and it's after sort of, and I sort of characterize it as after the bad thing has happened, the horrible thing has happened. What we're doing tonight, and we want to educate you all to do, is to be armed with the information, to have the information about what is sexual assault, what isn't, how can you help a friend, how can we get out in front of this issue and prevent it before it even happens. And that's certainly a passion of mine, and I hope to bring that passion to all of you this evening as well. Next slide, please. We're primarily going to focus tonight on sexual assault, which is different than sexual harassment. Sexual assault is a physical action. Sexual harassment can include elements that are physical, but can be a lot of words and things that are said to other individuals. But the study is pretty significant around sexual harassment as well. This was a study that was done in 2013 involving 7th to 12th grade students, and in that study, they found that 56% of girls have experienced sexual harassment, 40% of boys have experienced sexual harassment. And that includes online, in person, and then sort of generally sexual harassment. Next slide, please. There have been some studies that have looked at race and sexual violence. African American and Hispanic girls are more likely to experience sexual violence than individuals who identify as white or Caucasian, who are white or Caucasian. About 12% of sexual assault victims are African American, 11% Hispanic, and 10% white. So I think that that's an important sort of thing to keep in mind as we're talking about sexual assault. Next slide, please. Another statistic that is out there is that LGBTQA+ students are more likely to experience sexual harassment and sexual violence than heterosexual youth. In one study, 8% of transgender youth indicated that they had experienced sexual harassment. Close to 30% of lesbian or bisexual girls indicated that they had been forced to have sexual intercourse. 25% of gay or bisexual boys indicated that they had been forced to have sexual intercourse. Again, significant statistics. And unfortunately, the statistics around dating abuse and LGBTQA teens are similar in terms of the statistics around the fact that individuals that are LGBTQA+ experience abuse at higher rates with sexual assault and dating violence. Next slide, please. Youth with physical disabilities are more likely to experience sexual violence than youth without physical disabilities. Over 25% of girls with physical disabilities have indicated that they've experienced sexual violence, over 18% of boys. And in one study, over 22% of youth with physical disabilities described that they had experienced what's called contact sexual violence, which means touching, actual physical, person-on-person violence. And this is 1.74 times higher than individuals without physical disabilities. So we share these statistics to let you all know that unfortunately sexual assault can be prevalent or is prevalent. And one of the goals of tonight is for everyone to understand that this is not, unfortunately, not an uncommon phenomenon, but it's one that can be combated with information and education. So again, tonight you all are taking the first step, or maybe it's 10th step for those of you that have had attended one of these seminars or have educated yourself on your own or familiar with this issue. But it is a step towards learning more and to being someone that's helping to solve the issue and to bring, as I like to describe it, sort of an issue that is a lot of the times in darkness into the light, because there can be a lot of shame associated with sexual assault, a lot of feeling like it can be your fault. And what we want to say to you tonight, loud and clear, is that sexual assault can take many different forms, but the one thing that remains consistent, the one thing that is the same, is that sexual assault is never, never the victim's fault, and that you are not alone. We're going to spend the next few minutes talking about what is sexual assault. How is it defined? Now, the term sexual assault can refer to sexual contact or behavior that occurs without the explicit consent of the victim. That's what sexual assault is, sexual contact or behavior that occurs without the explicit consent of the victim. And this can be things like rape or attempted rape, and we're going to define rape in a couple of minutes. Any unwanted sexual touching. It can be over the clothes, it can be under the clothes, anywhere on an intimate part of your body. It can even include kissing. It can include touching someone on the butt. It can include any sort of sexual touching, as I've described. It can also include forcing someone to perform or to receive sexual acts. Can we go back a slide, please? It can include forcing a victim to perform or receive sexual acts such as oral sex. So forcing someone to receive it or forcing someone to do it on someone else. That all is sexual assault. And so to be very clear, those are things that sexual assault includes. Next slide, please. Now, what is rape? The term rape in Maryland has a very specific definition under the criminal law that I'm going to share with you. Rape and sexual assault often go hand in hand. Now, rape is a form of sexual assault, but not all sexual assault is rape. And I'm going to define for you what constitutes rape, but understand that rape does not sort of corner the market on what constitutes sexual assault. And that's what I was describing before. Sexual assault can include touching someone over their clothes over their clothes on an intimate part of their body. And that can be a different crime under the law and not defined as rape. But I want to share with you this evening, what is the specific definition of rape? Because rape in Maryland is actually beyond just what we would think, which would be, or what it used to be up until 2017. Rape was defined just as vaginal intercourse. So between a man and a woman or a girl and a boy. Or individuals that have those body parts, let's be clear, but it was defined as vaginal intercourse only. However, the General Assembly recognized that rape should also include anal intercourse. Oral sex is also now in Maryland to be considered rape, and any other penetration of genital or anal opening is considered to be rape. And that can be with a finger, it can be with an object. I know I'm being a little graphic here, but I'm just trying to be specific so that everyone understands what is the criminal law around rape. And what I'm describing to you now is second-degree rape, and I'll tell you in a minute what first-degree rape is, just so that you have the definitions as we move forward. If you could continue clicking on this slide. So it's vaginal or anal intercourse, oral sex, or other penetration by force or threat of force without the consent of the other. Next slide, please. And it's important to understand that penetration, however slight, is considered to be rape. And again, not to be sort of graphic or gross, but we kind of warned you at the beginning, and this is a kind of mature topic when we're talking about sexual assault, but it just, even it goes a little bit in, that's considered to be rape. Force. The amount of force that's necessary depends on the circumstances. No particular amount of force is required, and this is under the law. And what we have to prove of prosecutors, we have to prove force, but it's going to depend every time on the circumstances. And no particular amount of force is required. It's also going to depend on maybe the size difference between the two individuals, the history between the two individuals. Are there threatening words that are being said while the rape is happening? Is there fear? Is there a history of violence between these two individuals that makes the person fearful? So I want to just be clear on that. Also, the law does not require that the state prove that the victim of the rape physically resisted it happening, because someone could be a lot smaller and physical resistance would mean nothing. There's no requirement under the law that a victim physically resist. I'm not saying that victims shouldn't physically resist. I'm not saying that victims shouldn't, try their best in those circumstances, but sometimes trying your best is doing nothing because it's so scary and so fearful, and you may be afraid for your life. Consent means actually agreeing to the act rather than merely submitting as a result of force or threat of force. And that was what I was describing a few moments ago. Consent means actually agreeing. So it means saying yes. It means saying yes. It means actually agreeing. Words matter here. So this is some of the definitions. I also want to note that in Maryland, everything I've described constitutes rape. And then there's a more serious charge in Maryland that for adults actually carries life in jail, that if you rape someone and also threaten to kill them or strangle them or suffocate them, or kidnap them and rape them, or work with another person to rape someone, all of that is a more serious version of rape in Maryland. And again, if you're an adult and charged with first-degree rape, it carries life in prison. So I just want to lay that out there. There are a couple of other definitions of rape as well. Next slide, please. And this is a really important one. Rape also includes having any of those type of relations, vaginal intercourse, anal intercourse, oral sex, or penetration, if the victim is drunk, under the influence of drugs, unconscious, or physically unable to resist or communicate that they don't consent, or if someone has an intellectual or mental disability or a cognitive disability, anything that may make someone unable to resist or consent. And again, what is consent? It's getting to the yes. It's getting to the affirmative yes. If someone is drunk or passed out, they cannot get to the affirmative and knowing yes. It is not possible, and that is considered under the law to be rape. There's also what's known as statutory rape, which is where if the victim is under the age of 14 and the person who is doing the raping is at least 4 years older than the victim. There's also other sexual offenses that include situations where the victim is 14 or 15, and there's force or there's other sexual acts that may happen. It's going to be considered to be a third-degree sexual offense. And then there's fourth-degree sexual offense, which is simply an unconsented to sexual touching. There doesn't even have to be force involved for it to be a crime. An unconsented to physical touching or sexual touching is a crime in the state of Maryland. The bottom line is, without consent, sexual touching is a crime. And people have to understand what that is and what that isn't. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out there in kind of a very straightforward, maybe too straightforward kind of a way, but wanted to share that information with you this evening. I also wanted to touch just for a quick moment on a couple of other things that are crimes under Maryland law, which often go hand in hand with sexual assault and other types of dating violence. Stalking, harassment, child pornography, email harassment, sextortion, and revenge porn. So why is this important? Because there are some, sort of some disturbing trends around individuals who, share naked pictures of someone else, or even agree to share content with each other that are, naked pictures that then are sort of out there for the rest of the life, pretty much. It's very difficult to get things gone once you put them out there, either on the internet or if you've shared them via text or Messenger or Instagram or anything. And unfortunately, this can lead to some criminal activity. Someone could share that information without your permission, and it could be revenge porn. We've seen cases, even with kids, where someone is trying to, get someone to do something in exchange, to do something sexual, or to do something, that the person doesn't want to do, or to threatening to share pictures, and that can be considered to be sextortion. Also, stalking someone, a course of conduct that scares the person, or is malicious, it's following someone, that sort of thing. And that can be on email, that can be in person. Electronic harassment and stalking are real things. And then just a quick note on child pornography. Child pornography really is the sharing of pornographic images of anyone under the age of 18. So I say that as a cautionary tale, not tale, but a cautionary truth, that sharing images of individuals who are under the age of 18 engaged in any kind of sexual behavior is a crime under Maryland law. And that's just sort of what it is. We try to do a lot of education around this topic, but we wanted to put that out there because unfortunately, a lot of times when we're talking about sexual assault and consent and relationships, these topics come up as well. I'm going to turn it over to Smitha, who's going to talk to you for a few minutes about healthy sexual activity and take a deeper dive into what constitutes consent. Thank you, Smitha.
Sure. Hello, everybody, and I hope that you all can hear me okay. Again, my name is Smitha Varia. I am the program manager for the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, and I want to talk to you all a little bit more about consent now that we have an introduction to what sexual assault, harassment, and sexual abuse is. So it's really important that we talk about what healthy sexual activity is. So first, I want to make sure that you all know that engaging in sexual interactions and relationships should be consensual. Of course, I'm going to be talking more about what consent is in a few minutes. Respectful. Our initiative is called Choose Respect. All of our programs have the name respect in them because that is a key part of a healthy relationship. They must be informed, which means that you both should know what is going on, that there shouldn't be any tricks or secrets or distrust in the relationship. The relationship and the sexual activity should be honest in what's going on, and of course, they should be safe. So what is consent? What is the definition of consent? The definition of consent is it's someone giving their permission for all sexual contact that happens. It's freely given, it's of a person's own free will and absent of pressure. Consent is agreeing and saying yes throughout the entire act. Now, there's a lot of different things in this definition, right? It's freely given, right? There shouldn't be any pressure there. It's of a person's own free will, which means there shouldn't be threats or intimidation in there. It's absent of pressure. And then again, it's agreeing and saying yes throughout the entire act. That means that somebody might say yes at the beginning, and then they might change their mind. That consent has now been withdrawn, and the other person should not continue. So let's talk a little bit more about those things. We want to make sure that most people have heard no means no. We really want to change that conversation to yes means yes. The absence of no doesn't mean yes. If somebody doesn't say anything at all, that does not mean yes. Consent needs to be clear, it needs to be affirmative, and it needs to be enthusiastic, right, of desires of all the parties, of everybody involved. Drugs and alcohol impact decision-making and blur consent. A person who is intoxicated or impaired cannot give consent. I did see in the Q&A, there's some questions regarding alcohol, and if both people are intoxicated. We'll definitely touch on that during the question and answer, but those are great questions. It needs to be clear, right? You never want to assume, and don't rely on past interactions. Always ask. So that means that you may have done some sort of sexual activity last week, last month, that doesn't mean that they automatically say yes again. For example, I might tell my friend that she can borrow my car tomorrow. That doesn't mean she can borrow my car whenever she wants to, right? She has to ask every single time. And consent is specific. It's to one thing. So consent can mean something to one thing. It doesn't mean consent to everything. Someone may consent to kissing and hugging and touching. That doesn't mean that they're consenting to sex or penetration. Consent in the past, again, does not mean consent now, right? You have to ask every single time. And again, consent can be taken back at any time. So what does consent sound like? Let's talk about that. So what does it sound like? Usually, of course, we will say yes, that is what consent sounds like. But you can say it a lot of different ways. You can say this is okay, absolutely, I like that, of course, sure, yes. You want it to be affirmative and you want it to be enthusiastic, right? It can be like, woohoo, let's do this. Woohoo, I like that, let's go. Whatever it may be, it needs to be enthusiastic and affirmative. Now, when we think of what consent does not sound like, of course, we automatically think no or stop. Again, there are different ways to say this. I'm not ready, not tonight, I'm not sure. We also wanted to include this I guess so or maybe into this discussion because I guess so may sound like a yes, but if you think about it in a different way, if I walk into the room and I show my friend my new shoes and I say, do you like my new shoes? And she says, I guess so. That doesn't sound like a yes. That sounds like she doesn't really like my shoes, right? So you want, again, to get to that affirmative yes and being enthusiastic. And of course, stop and no are clear, not consenting. Now, sometimes somebody might not say anything at all. And they may be saying no through their body language. They may be pushing you away. They may be not responding. They might be moving around or trying to leave the room or looking down. They might be crying. Now, that does not mean that they are consenting just because they haven't said no. We want to make it clear that silence does not equal yes. The only thing that means yes is yes. Yes equals yes. We're going to watch a short video that many of you may have seen. It is the T consent video, but we like to show this video because it is very clear as to what consent is. You may need to turn up your volume to hear this video.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything.
So that gives us a little bit of a definition of what consent is. So consent, of course, we want to remember it's freely given, which means there's no pressure. It's reversible. You can change your mind in the middle of the act. It's informed. You're saying yes to what you know is going to happen. It's enthusiastic. You both want to do this, and it's specific to the act. So just remember that I love fries, because I do. So when in doubt, when you don't know if the person is consenting, just ask. It may sound strange. It's like, how am I supposed to ask them? But it's really easy, right? You know, can I kiss you? Are you comfortable? Does this feel good? Do you want to go any further? Do you like it if I do this? If you're still not sure, that means you do not have affirmative consent and you should not continue. Try to get clarification from the other person. So we're going to go through some examples of what consent is, and I'm going to pass it back over to Debbie to lead us through that.
Okay, before I move on to the slide, I want to just answer a couple of quick questions that I think it's just important to mention this now. We got a good question about what about non-binary people, and I neglected to include non-binary in my remarks earlier, and I definitely want to just mention that that there's not a lot of statistics done around non-binary people yet. And that was what I should have included that terminology when we were talking about hopefully prospectively, there will be more statistics around this. There was also a question related to the statistics about why is rape mainly targeted to African-American and Hispanic women? Really what that statistic was showing, and I guess I didn't explain it that well, but really what it was showing is that it's slightly disproportionately higher. It's not that it's mainly targeted to particular groups, it's just that it's slightly disproportionately higher for teens in those with that ethnicity or race. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there and just be clear with respect to those topics. And I also want to mention that many of you are putting questions in the Q&A, which is terrific. And we are going to do the best we can to answer the questions either as we go along or during the Q&A section. If we don't get to a question that you wanted an answer to, you can follow up with us by email. We're going to give contact information at the end, and we're happy to do more programs and take a deeper dive into some of these things that we're speaking about this evening if you want to learn more. So going back to our slides, we're going to show you 3 examples of consent and ask you which one of these is a good example of consent. If we could bring those up. Okay, so the question is 1, 2, or 3, which one of these is a good example of consent? Number 1, Maya wants to have sex with her partner Taylor, but has said they weren't ready for that step yet. Maya gets frustrated and after asking a lot tells Taylor that if they don't have sex soon, she'll break up with them. Taylor, feeling scared, agrees to have sex. Keith and Aaliyah meet at a party and hit it off. They start kissing and he asks her to go somewhere more private and she agrees. However, when they're alone, she begins to feel nervous and asks him to slow down. Keith pauses and asks her if she's okay and if she wants to go back to the party. Number 3, Jasmine and Grace meet online and agree to hang out. Jasmine is nervous and drinks several beers. She starts slurring her words and feeling fuzzy. When Grace starts kissing her, Jasmine tries to move away, but can't because she is dizzy and drunk. So you can put it in the chat if you'd like to put your answers in the chat. You can also just know them to yourself. Whatever you prefer, we're happy to have you all engage through the chat. I'm seeing lots of twos. Exactly. Number 2. Why is number 2 the one that involves consent? Because one of the parties said, are you okay? And do you want to go back to the party? She agreed, if you'll note, she agreed to go somewhere more private, but she told him to slow down and told him, she was very specific with him. So some things were okay. Kissing was okay, at least initially, when they were in a more public place. When they go to a more private place that she initially agreed to, she wasn't as comfortable. So her partner, or the person that came with her, paused, asked if she was okay, and did she want to go back to the party. It's really important, and this was another question in the Q&A, whether someone says, when does it okay? When do you need to stop? The bottom line is you need to get affirmative consent for every step of the way. A yes to every step of the way, an affirmation that what is happening is okay with the other person, because it may be hard for them to say it's okay. They may not, they may be concerned about saying that it's okay, but if they're asked directly, then they can give a yes or a no. And really you want to get to that affirmative yes every time. Get to the affirmative yes. Next slide. Okay, we have a few other examples of consent that we're going to ask you to respond to. Number 1, let us know which one is a good example of consent. Daniel asked Emma to text him a nude photo of her. She said no, but he said, if you really liked me, you would do it. And if she didn't, he could find another girl who would. So she did. Number 2, every time Vanessa passes Corey in the hall, he slaps her butt. The first time he did it, she ignored him. The second time he did it, she told him to stop, but that just made him laugh. The third time, he egged on his friends to do it. Number 3, Keon and Jake meet online and decide to meet at a park to hang out. Keon starts touching Jake, and Jake steps away and says that he just wants to talk. Keon is frustrated and says, but I thought you wanted to hook up. Jake says, maybe another day, but not yet. Even though Kenan is annoyed, he stops, which is our example of consent. Fantastic. I'm seeing lots of threes, lots of threes. So one of the questions that we got was around what is sextortion, what constitutes pornography. So just a simple legal definition, a nude photo in and of itself is not necessarily pornography, not that I'm promoting sending nude pictures of each other. It's someone engaged in a sexual act is the legal definition of pornography, or some sort of sexual display, or if the photograph is focused on an intimate area of the body. If there's a focus on the intimate area of the body, that is also considered to be child pornography. So a whole nude can be considered pornography because the focus is on the whole body and intimate areas if everywhere is nude. I know that that's not making a lot of sense, probably what I'm saying, but the bottom line is a nude photograph can be. There's different laws federally and there's different laws under the state, but nude photographs of anyone under the age of 18 is concerning, and really that type of content should not be shared. It can be dangerous and it can be criminal. An example of sextortion, if we look at number 1, just again, there was a question about what is sextortion. If Daniel had asked Emma to text him a nude photo of her and she said no, and she said if she really liked him, she would do it, and if she didn't, he could find another girl. If he had said, if you don't send one to me, I'm going to send, I'm going to say terrible things about you. I'm going to do this, that, and the other to you. I'm going to, I'm going to harm someone that you know. I'm going to harm you. I'm going to do this, that, or the other. And that is where sextortion it comes in, when you're really threatening to harm someone or to take something of value from them, or something like that in exchange for a sexual act, or sending pictures or whatever, that kind of thing. Next slide. So the most important thing to remember is consent is mutual, it's active, it's respecting boundaries, it's retractable. Retractable means you can change your mind at any time. You have to check in with the other person. It has to be willingly given. You have to get to the yes. Yes means yes. If you remember one thing from tonight, It's yes means yes. I'm going to turn it back to Smitha to talk to you about bystander intervention, what that means and how you can help others when you see something isn't right.
All right, thank you, Debbie. So we wanted to take this last part of the presentation to talk about what bystander intervention is. We've been talking about what rape is, what sexual assault is, what harassment is, but what can you do? How can you help your peers, your friends, your family members, and just even in the general public? So bystander intervention is recognizing a potentially harmful situation or interaction and choosing to respond in a way that could potentially influence the outcome. We're going to be talking about the warning signs, what you might see that might lead to an assault or harassment. We're going to be talking about the barriers, why people don't intervene. And then we're going to be talking about 5 different tactics of how you can help hopefully stop an occurrence. Now we're going to watch a video right now, and this video is about bystander intervention. It's also a video that won our Choose Respect video contest in 2020. We're going to be mentioning our video contest at the end, but right now our video contest is open. You can create a 60-second dating violence prevention video, and first place will win $1,000. And all entrants, if you follow the rules correctly, will receive 10 SSL hours. Again, we'll be sharing that information at the end, but I just wanted to let you know that this video won $1,000 and an additional $500 because they won the fan favorite as well.
Slut.
She was
I
asking
mean,
for
yeah, look at her for dressing that
I feel
way.
bad for her
it. That
boyfriend.
skank was asking
Why
for
are girls
it.
like that such sluts?
Hey, I would have
Look
done
at
the
her
same
walking
thing
around
if it were
so
my
she could
girlfriend.
face.
She deserved
I'd
it.
hit her too.
I think it's a little harsh. No one deserves to be treated like that.
OMG, I fully agree.
Yeah, beating's wrong no matter what.
He shouldn't have hit her.
She's the victim.
You don't even know the details of the
based
situation.
on their clothes.
She's not a slut.
It wasn't her
Her
fault.
outfit isn't the problem
All
here.
she did was wear clothes.
She's the one who got assaulted.
It wasn't her fault. It was
She
his.
was the victim. Don't be a bystander. Blaming the victim only makes it so much harder for them to say something. If you see someone being abused, speak out to help them, not hurt them. If you or a loved one is experiencing abuse by a partner, contact the Montgomery County Family Justice Center at 240-773-0444.
I'm the victim.
So now I want us to talk a little bit about what bystander intervention is and some of the warning signs. So these are some of the things you may see in public, in school, with your friends, where it might heighten your awareness of what might be going on. You may see somebody touching someone that seems unwanted, right? The other person's just kind of flinching or looking away or looking very uncomfortable. You might see facial expressions of just, agitation or scared or frozen. And that, again, that body language. You may see somebody trying to get someone alone, trying to pull them away from the group, or testing boundaries. You may see at a party or out that they keep giving them more and more drinks. You may see a friend focusing on someone who doesn't seem that interested, right? But they won't give up. They keep going and keep going. You may see physical abuse, right? You may see pushing or shoving, aggressive language. You may hear people talking about plans to hook up with someone or talking about getting somebody drunk so they can take advantage. You may hear sexist or inappropriate jokes. All of these are warning signs of somebody this doesn't mean that they are going to assault somebody, but it just kind of heightens your awareness and you might want to keep an eye on what's going on. So there are a lot of barriers to intervene, right? You aren't sure of what you're witnessing. You're not sure, like, is this something I should be worried about. I know they're dating, so maybe I shouldn't step in. You're just not sure. You might think that someone else will step in, right? You're at a party. There's a lot of other people there. You're not the only one noticing. So you might think, okay, well, I don't have to worry about it because there are a lot of other people here. You might be worried about your own safety. Absolutely. You might say, well, if I step in, the person might attack me or might blame me. So you're worried about your own safety. You might feel like it's none of your business, right? Well, that's between the two of them, so I'm not going to get involved. Or you don't want to be a snitch, right? You don't want to be a tattletale. You don't want to embarrass anybody. Quite simply, you might not be sure what to do or how to help. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next few slides. You might worry that you might get teased or you be embarrassed. You might not want to make things worse, right? You think, oh, if I step in, then they're going to get angry and I don't want to make the situation worse. And your identities might make it difficult to step in as well. So I'm going to give you 5 different ways in which you might be able to help or step in. And they're called the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. We're going to talk about these 5: direct, delegate, distract, debrief, and document. So first, direct. Call it like you see it, right? You want to point out the threatening or inappropriate behavior. You might say things like, hey, that joke was demeaning and not funny. Or you might say, they said they didn't want to leave with you, back off. Or just leave her alone, leave them alone, leave him alone, right? Call it like you see it. Just say point blank, what they're doing is wrong. You don't want to argue or debate with the other person. You just want it to be clear and you want it to be direct. If that person responds, just assist the targeted individual, the person who's being harassed or assaulted, instead of engaging with the perpetrator. Now, what's really important here, though, is we only want you to directly intervene if it is safe to do so. If it's not safe to intervene because there's violence already happening, use another tactic. If that means calling 911 because a crime is being committed or getting an adult, do that. We don't want you to put your safety at risk. So only use this tactic if it is safe to do so. If this is not safe to do so, or if you are uncomfortable doing this, you might want to use the term distract, right? Do anything to disrupt the interruption or situation to keep it from escalating. Excuse me. So you may go between the couple and say, and to the person who's being harassed, hey, let's go get some food, I'm hungry. Or hey, come look at this funny TikTok. Look at this video I just saw. Look at this Insta page. Or you can go up to them and say, oh, aren't you in my math class? You want to distract the situation to stop from happening, right? What time is it? Hey, can you give me a ride home? Whatever it may be to stop that situation, just distract it. You may want to delegate. Power in numbers, right? Get other people to help you intervene. You might want to find one of their friends to step in and help. You might want to get an adult to step in, or you might want to get a whole group of people together to distract the incident that's going on, right? You might go up to a group of people and say, you know what, that doesn't look right. I think we should do something. Maybe one person distracts while the other person takes the person who's being harassed away, or getting an adult to step in. Power in numbers is always great. It is very, very, very likely that you are not the only one that's seeing this interaction and worrying about what might happen. Debrief. You can check in with the person afterwards. You can just go up to them and be like, are you okay? What they did to you was not okay. Do you want me to take you home? Do you want me to find a ride for you? I saw what happened. How can I help? Right? You want to go to that person and let them know that what happened is not okay, right? A lot of times we know that victims blame themselves, right? Oh, if I wasn't doing this, or if I didn't say this. You debriefing with them and showing that what happened was not right can go a long way. And lastly, If all other people are already intervening, if somebody's distracting or delegating or directing, then you can also document what's going on, right? We all have our phones with us all the time. You can take photos or videos, note the date and the time and the place of the incident that's happening. But we don't want you to use this documentation for yourselves. Give that documentation to the other person. Do not post videos without getting permission. And again, we only want you to do this if somebody else is also already intervening using one of the other methods. We don't want you to just stand there and videotape the situation and not do something more intervening, if that makes sense. So let's go over some scenarios. So you're having lunch with your friends and a group of students nearby start making sexual gestures and comments to one of your friends that's sitting with you. Though trying to ignore the comments, you see that your friend is upset. What do you do? So in the chat, maybe some of you can just respond to what might you do using one of those tactics about this situation. Somebody said that they would direct them, they would ask them to stop and leave, they would move away, they would tell them to stop, confront, direct, distract, walk away, move away. These are fantastic. These are great, great tactics of what people can do in a situation like this. You can document. I'm basically seeing all of the different types that we just talked about. And I'm really glad that you all are noticing or learning what you can do to hopefully make this go away. And one person said, I tell them, hey, want to eat somewhere else? And afterwards, they would let a staff member or a teacher know. Absolutely. So here's another situation. You're at a party and there's drinking. Someone nearby has had a lot to drink and is being harassed or manipulated by someone, and you think something harmful might happen to them. What can you do? Someone said, get the bartender. Absolutely. You might be out at a restaurant or a bar, and you would go get an adult or a staff member, the bouncer. You'd pretend to be their friend to get them away. Try to divert their attention, ask them if they need help, inform someone, ask them if they're okay. Oh, all these chats are flying, and this is really, really great. Get a group of people together to help them leave. Ask for help, ask them what they do need for help, call the bartender. These are great. These are great. I'm hoping that you all are learning some different ideas of how you can help when a situation like this is occurring. So I want to talk a little bit about how you can help a friend specifically. So if you suspect that your friend has been sexually assaulted, what can you do? You want to approach them in a confidential manner, in a time and a place away from interruptions, right? Not during the middle of class or in between classes, but you really want to kind of get them alone into a safe place. And you just want to start by gently talking about what you've observed. You may notice that they've been withdrawn or very sad. They may be acting differently than how they usually do. And then we just want you to listen to what they have to say, right? We don't want to tell them what to do or how to act or how to report, but listen to what they have to say and then go from there. If your friend comes to you for help, of course, you need to be supportive and listen. We, of course, want you to believe them. Give them time to open up, right? They may not want to tell you the whole story right away. And of course, do not make victim blaming statements, right? Don't say, well, why were you at the party? Or what were you wearing? Or you knew they were going to act like that, right? Don't make any victim blaming statements. The best thing that you can do is ask them how you can help, right? You don't want to tell them what to do. You don't want to tell them what you would do in that situation. Everybody reacts differently. So ask them how you can help. It could be just listening. It could be hanging out with them. It could be calling the counselor or calling the hotline. But you meet them where they are. And of course, refrain from telling them what to do. And then we want you to make sure to refer them to the resources. I'm going to share the resources in Montgomery County. All of these services are free. So the Montgomery County Family Justice Center, which is located in Rockville, is open business hours. And they can offer help with safety planning, with therapy, with criminal charges, working with the Department of Juvenile Services. And we can work with anybody 16 and older without parental consent. If you are under the age of 16, we just need your parents' permission to be able to talk with you and work with you. The Montgomery County Victim Assistance and Sexual Assault Program is also located in Rockville, and they're open 24 hours a day. They only need parental accompaniment if the person is under the age of 12. And during our question and answer, we have 2 of our therapists here from the VASAP program that will be able to answer questions about their services more specifically. The Shady Grove Adventist Healthcare Center, what they do, they're a hospital in Shady Grove, and they help with what we know of as rape kits, right? Or forensic exams. After an assault happens, they're the ones at the hospital to check you out, make sure you don't have any big injuries. They take evidence collection for criminal cases. So they are the best people to go to. And of course, if you're not comfortable with any of these, the RAIN hotline, which is the National Sexual Assault Hotline, is available also 24 hours a day. You can text with them, you can chat with them online, and you can, of course, call them as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Debbie now to talk more specifically about MCPS and their reporting information.
So those of you that attend Montgomery County Public Schools, first of all, thank you, Smitha. And those of you that attend Montgomery County Public Schools, there are specific ways that you can report sexual assault, harassment, bullying, intimidation to the schools. Again, it's your choice to make that report, and there are forms on the MCPS website. You can also directly call the Montgomery County Police Department or obviously 911 in the event of an emergency. You can also speak to your school principal, counselor, student welfare liaison, or any MCPS staff member. You could contact the MCPS Title IX coordinator, which is the individual who is the coordinator and responsible for addressing issues related to sexual assault and sexual harassment that occur in the schools. There's also Safe Schools, which is a Maryland tip line and an anonymous reporting system that can be used to report threats to the safety or well-being of students. You can also send a text to Everymind at the number that's on the screen, and these slides will be available on our website through a recording of this webinar in a few days. So that number for Everymind is a number that you can text. And as was mentioned in the answer to one of the questions in the Q&A, it's up to the individual that's been victimized as to whether they want to report. You don't have to report to the police if you don't want to. Sexual assault is not a mandated report unless it's a sexual abuse, which is an adult and a child. So there have been questions in the chat about what is the difference between sexual abuse and sexual assault. Under the law, under the criminal law, there's a distinction. Sexual abuse is when have an adult and a child. And if the child and the adult are related to each other, it could be a child even age 17. And an adult who is related to them, or a household member, or a family member, or someone that's in charge of supervising them. And then sexual assault is really is cases that are not statutory or not the adult and child. It's going to be individuals, either 2 adults, 2 minors, those sort of situations. Sexual misconduct between individuals that are don't have the age difference, if you will. So keep in mind this information about reporting information for MCPS. If you're a private school student, know that there are tons of resources. They don't just apply to MCPS students. You can text Everymind. You can reach directly out to VASAP, and that information was provided on the previous slide. All of those resources are available to all of you and your families if you want to reach out. They're free, and reaching out to VASAP is confidential as well. Next slide. So we're just going to spend a moment talking about the Choose Respect initiative. There were some questions about programming around domestic violence and teen dating violence. And I want to tell you that we have a program called Expect Respect. Some of you may have had the opportunity to be a part of this program in your health classrooms. Some of the schools teach it in their health classrooms. And we are very interested in bringing it to your classrooms, but we can also bring this program, which again is about teen dating violence prevention. We can bring it to any group, any team, any after-school club, any group that you're affiliated with other than school, at the YMCA or some other organization, a youth group, anything that you're affiliated with. We can come and bring this programming. We also have programming for parents. I understand that it's difficult to see this slide on the Zoom screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in the chat our website, which is essentially, if you Google Choose Respect Montgomery, Maryland, you're going to be able to get to our website that has all of this information there, lots of links, lots of ways to learn more. We also have programs for athletes. We can bring programs to teams and can talk about things like sexual assault prevention, bullying, how not to bully, alcohol and drug abuse, domestic violence prevention, all of those things. And those programs for athletes can also be programs for really any group. And we also have an annual event that we're going to talk a little bit more about in a moment, but that's going to be on March 27th, 2022. And lastly, we have the video contest that Smitha referenced earlier, where you can have the opportunity to win not only a lot of prize money, up to $1,000, but you can also earn 10 SSL hours for participating in the video contest. You create a 60-second video. You can go to our website and you can check out lots of examples. You saw one tonight of successful videos and videos that have won these prizes in the past. And the contest is open to 6th through 12th graders, and the deadline is February 28th. All of the rules and more information are on our website. Next slide. And Respect Fest. So we have an annual event. You can also earn SSL hours by being a part of our annual event. This year it will be a hybrid event. We will have some virtual, we will have some live at the Wheaton Recreation Center, the new community center that's open in Wheaton, Maryland. And I'd encourage you all to learn more about it. There's going to be music and learning opportunities and ways to engage with the content that are fun. There's going to be a resource fair. And a lot of ways to share information, yoga, self-defense classes, and discussion groups around the topic of dating violence prevention. And we would encourage you to join in that event as well. For more information, go to our website. You can sign up. There's a Google form there where you can sign up on a list to get more information. We're going to transition now, to our panel. I know it's a few minutes after 8. We will conclude promptly at 9 o'clock this evening. There were a lot of questions coming in, and my colleagues valiantly worked to answer them as quickly as they can. I know that was frustrating for some of you that maybe didn't get the answers to the questions that you were hoping for. But I would encourage you, to continue to ask them. We're going to do the best we can. And for follow-up questions, you can reach us through the Choose Respect Montgomery website as well. So we're going to start it off with a few questions, and some of these may have been answered in the Q&A, and some are new questions. Some are questions that were submitted in advance by some of you. We had reached out prior to tonight to solicit some questions. So we're going to start with a couple of those. One of the questions was a question about if someone is vulnerable, who may be less independent than someone else, are they more susceptible to experiencing bullying or sexual assault than someone else? I'm going to defer to Dr. Prince and to Rafia and Colleen. I'm just going to go with first names here and ask you to answer that question, please.
Sure, I can try to help and give some answers. So I think we talked earlier, and we saw some slides earlier in the presentation about how certain populations, so kind of more vulnerable populations, might be more at risk for sexual assault. And I think, one takeaway is that sexual assault seems to be much more prevalent than any of us would want it to be. So there's some statistics like 1 in 6 women have experienced some form of sexual assault in their lives. The statistics for men are less, but men are certainly getting sexually assaulted. I think one way to look at this is for everyone who's on this webinar to really think about, if somebody's isolated, you'd want yourself, if you're that person, to really think about who you could talk to if something were happening that was making you uncomfortable. And I think it's really important, because the prevalence is so high, it's not necessarily that just because somebody stays to themselves or has a small group of friends that they might be sexually assaulted, but that lots of people are at risk for sexual assault. And so to think about for yourselves, who might be somebody that you could talk to if there's something that's happening that's uncomfortable, if something happens that you really didn't like, and how you can reach out for help. I think that everybody, there's a high risk, and you want to make sure that in your minds, you're thinking about what you can do to help yourself be safe and to get help if you need to.
Great, thank you so much to Colleen. I have a question now for Captain Amy Dom. If someone wants to report a case to the police, what do they do? What if they're not sure if they want the case to go forward, but they just want to know what their options are? Can you talk a little bit about that criminal justice piece?
Absolutely, Debbie. So when we talk about reporting, and what we really do here with special victims is work with the people who come forward, who have been victimized, who are reporting some type of event that's occurred. We understand that, number one, it's a really vulnerable time in their lives. And we want to ensure, above everything else, that they are receiving services to help them in their journey to becoming survivors. That's the single most important thing for us and for my detectives and for my team. Now, that may or may not mean following this case through to a conclusion with the criminal justice system. A victim may come forward and report to the police, which would involve contacting our patrol units or contacting our special victims detectives here, making an initial report. They may make that, they may find out what their options are and then say, you know what, I don't want to go forward with this case criminally, and that's okay. What we do here, what my detectives are trained to do, is to talk to people, to unite them with services, to ensure that all of their needs are being met. And in many occasions, Debbie, you know this as well as I do, we may have a victim come forward and report an event that they're not comfortable moving forward with for criminal prosecution until many years later. And that's okay too. So for someone who chooses to come forward and make a police report, know that you'll be contacted by a detective here at Special Victims, and they will bring you in for an interview. You'll be asked a number of questions about what happened. And in many cases, you may be asked those questions by representatives from either the police department or the Treehouse Child Advocacy Center. Our child welfare and social workers may also be involved. But what we're really doing is having a conversation about what happened, and we can make decisions about next steps together.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that really important information. In Montgomery County, we really take an approach that is victim-centered and follow the path that the victim wants to follow. And we also use the words victim and survivor interchangeably. And I want that to be super clear to everyone here tonight. If you are someone that has experienced a sexual assault, you've survived that sexual assault. I often use the term victim because that's how it's referred to in the criminal justice system. We have a victim of a crime. While you may be a victim of a crime, you are a survivor of a sexual assault. And I want that to be super clear. And that's what I was talking about earlier in this conversation tonight, that we want to flip the script in a way. If you are affected or impacted by sexual assault, or you know a friend that has, and they're able to talk about it and come out and share their story, they're going to protect themselves. They're going to protect other people. They may not be ready to do that now, but they may be ready in 3 months, 5 months, a year from now. Be there to support them, as Smitha was describing earlier. That's what we can all do for each other, to be educated and to work together to prevent this and to get this info out there. so that we can root it out. I'm going to direct a question now to Colleen and Rafia. If someone wants to access services at Trauma Services at your program, Victim Assistance and Sexual Assault Program, we shorten it to VASAP. Am I saying VASAP, not VASAP? I hear VASAP, I hear VASAP, however you want to call it. Our Trauma Services Program. How does someone access those services? Like, what do they need to do? And then what happens once they've tried to access them?
So I can answer the first part of that, which is going to be pretty easy. And I'm going to give you guys the phone numbers to reach us. So again, our kind of long name is Victim Assistance and Sexual Assault Program, and we shorten it to be VASAP, which is just the first letters of each of those words. Our crisis line, which is available 24 hours a day, is 240-777 and the word help, which is 4357. So I can put that in the chat. Oh, somebody did. So 240-777-4357. We also have an intake line that does have therapists available during business hours, so kind of 8:30 to 5, and that's 240-777-1355. There are also other trigger points in the community. So if somebody is calling and they want to talk to a therapist, they're not sure if they want to go to police or not, those phone numbers are confidential, and your privacy will be protected when you call. Sometimes people are ready to report, or they've been sexually assaulted and they go to the hospital right away. That can also trigger our services. So we have rape crisis volunteers that can come out to the hospital. The police can trigger our involvement and our therapists. And we also have victim advocates who can help if somebody does want to report to police or go through the court process. So there's kind of assistance at every step.
Right. So there's no real wrong door to get to us. Even at school, if you decide to speak to one of the counselors there or the health nurse, we have therapists assigned to each school. And we can come out, we'll send a therapist to come reach out and speak to you about what you need to talk about. So there's no wrong way to get to us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So know that these services are there, know that they're free, they're available, they're confidential, and please utilize them. And if you have a question about a friend and how to help a friend, you can also reach out. And get guidance on how to help a friend. So don't hesitate, to reach out. These services are available and they're free, and we want to help. So here's another question, and this is also back to Rafia and Colleen and Smitha, if you want to throw in. What happens if my parents aren't, a student asked this question, what happens if my parents aren't supportive of my need to get this kind of help? And what if I don't have insurance? Like, what do I do? And how can I access these services if my parents don't support me, or I don't have insurance?
So this past October, there was a bill that was passed called the Augustine Bill, which now allows for folks 12 years and older to receive mental health services without the consent of their parents. So if you are in need of help, you can come through any of the doors, whether it's you tell a counselor or someone at the school, then they can reach out to us and we can come to you for help.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Another question, and I know this was already touched on, but I want to make sure that this gets clearly out there. What if someone needs medical support or wants a sexual assault exam? What if they're afraid that they have a sexually transmitted disease? What do they do? If they get a sexual assault exam, do the police automatically get involved? So I'm going to ask, Rafia, Colleen, and Amy, if you want to throw in on that too.
So if you've been sexually assaulted, you can go to the hospital at Shady Grove Hospital for the forensic exam. They have something called a Jane Law kit, meaning that you can go in and have the exam done and you don't have to report to police. And they will hold all that evidence that they collect until you're ready to report. If you're concerned about STIs, You actually have control of how much help that you want when you go to the hospital. So if you want to go in and you say, I don't want to do the kit, I just want the STI testing, you just let the forensic nurse know, and she'll provide you with what you need.
And Amy, how does that work for your shop? I mean, if someone goes to the medical unit to get help and they aren't sure if they want to talk to a detective, what happens?
So the nurse, once you walk in, it actually, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Rafia, you can start out and then the captain can throw in after that, whatever, it's all good.
Okay, once you go into the hospital, the nurse will ask you permission, like if you want to have a volunteer be there with you during the exam. So that triggers us automatically. We have a team of volunteers who accompany victims for sex assault and domestic violence 24 hours a day, every day of the year, so that during those times, victims are not alone.
And during those types of reporting events, or when someone goes to the hospital for that type of exam, they probably will never see a police officer unless one is there for some other type of event. My detectives won't respond, patrol officers won't go. We go periodically and collect those kits from the hospital and put them into evidence. We do some very basic reporting that just basically says a time and a date, and we keep them for 99 years. So that if a victim or survivor chooses to come forward at a later date, we're able to.
Great. Thank you so much. And Amy, this is going to be a question that's kind of going to go, I'm going to start answering, and then I'm going to flip over to you to finish up the answer. But the question is, what if both people are drunk and have sex? Or what if someone says yes while they're drunk? So I'm going to kind of give a very straightforward answer here. You can't consent if you're intoxicated. That's the bottom line. You can't consent if you're intoxicated. If you're with someone that's intoxicated, whether it's by drugs, whether it's by alcohol, whether it's by prescription medication or non-prescription medication, any substance, if you are under the influence of something, you cannot consent. And if you're with someone that's under the influence of something, they cannot consent. Even if you ask and they say yes, they're in no position to consent. We see cases all the time in my division where it's a situation where one of the parties is drunk, the other party, it takes advantage of them, and the person that's drunk either doesn't say no, doesn't say yes, or may say yes, or may say no. It's frankly irrelevant. If someone is drunk or under the influence, they cannot consent to sex, period. If both parties are drunk, we've gotten this question too tonight, if both parties are drunk, nobody can consent. Now, what does this mean for a prosecution? There's a question, who becomes the victim? Who becomes the abuser? It could be either one. It depends on who comes forward. It depends on how the narrative is told. You want to make sure you are not in that position, period. Protect yourself. And so what does that mean? That means, if you are, I'm not going to be naive and suggest that, teenagers don't do these things. I don't think it's a great idea, but I'm not going to suggest that I know that, that the teenagers don't do these things. Okay. Be with friends, be safe. Don't let anyone pour your drinks. Don't do drugs. Don't do things that are illegal. And I feel like I'm also sounding like a little bit of a parent here too, but that's the bottom line. Be with friends, stay safe. Make sure that someone is sober and is with you, so that someone can watch out for you. First of all, don't do it. But second of all, if you're going to do it, have a friend, be with people that can take care of you. We get these cases where people are at a party and someone will say, hey, why don't you just go outside with me for a little while? And suddenly they're being sort of led away from the party, and bad things go down. And that can be whether you're drunk beyond able to recognize things, or even if you're just slightly drunk, or even if you're not drunk and you walk out with someone and you go into a dark place together. That can be very, very dangerous. And we see those cases, unfortunately, too often. Amy, if you want to throw in or add on top of that.
I'm not sure I have anything to add to that, Debbie, although I do want to drive this point home, because I think that it's very, very important, especially for our students, who are looking to graduate and going into new environments in the next year. You can't be anywhere by yourself. Don't leave your friends at a bar, don't leave early. If you went together, you go home together. And like Debbie said, if you're drunk, you can't consent. Yes means yes, and anything less than yes, time to walk away.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to say yes means yes enough tonight. We're going to keep on saying it. So I think another important area for us to cover, and I think this is really going to be for all of our panelists, and Amy, we can start with you, is the topic of social media and how social media can be used, frankly, a little bit of a weapon in areas involving sexual assault, harassment, how victims can get shamed about what may have happened, or if other people find out about it. So I don't know, Amy, if you want to start, and Colleen and Rafia, if you can address that as well.
I would love to. So this was the single most important thing my detectives asked me to talk about tonight, was when we talk about the impact that social media has, not only on our victims, on our survivors, but on the entire community as a whole, it really cannot be overlooked. What we see a lot of is anonymous reporting on social media, where someone will post that they heard that so-and-so, that someone raped someone. And by saying that, I mean, John raped, put in, Jane, and that this happened. And I think that people think that they're helping by putting that out there. And I'm sure that, this really goes into what Colleen and Dr. Prince can really talk about, is the impact and the re-traumatization on our victims. And we really need for our survivors to be ready to come forward and speak their own story. And sometimes that takes time, and it's not on anyone else's timetable. It really needs to be on that person's timeline. And when we see these things, it really impacts our ability to investigate later on, but also we see a huge impact on our victims and survivors.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Rafia and Colleen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So I completely agree. And I think one of the things that's really important, particularly for the therapists and victim advocates at FASAP, is that we are really here to respond to what the survivor is ready to deal with. So anything that gets kind of put out there without that person's consent, or that brings up the incident itself, could be triggering for the person who is victimized. And also it's, again, taking away their control. So this whole incident, or the whole incident of sexual assault, is against somebody's own control of their own body. And each time somebody else takes charge or says, you need to do this or you need to do that, and they're not ready, it's less and less control that they have over the process and over their own experience. So we really want to, in terms of healing, have our survivors have as much control as possible over what gets shared when, and kind of respect their process and their healing process and what they're ready for.
Also, too, especially with social media and things being posted and things being said, that can feel very, very isolating, and you may feel alone. So it's important to know that you are not alone. So when you reach out for help, it starts to build that network and brings you into this network of people that are there to support you. And when you do that, that is also helpful in safety planning and helping you manage how to deal with when you're walking down the hall and someone may look at you and make you feel awkward or strange. So it's really important to reach out for help, because you are not alone in this experience.
Thank you so much. I want to pivot for a second and go back to some of the questions about sextortion and child pornography. One of the questions that I saw just now in the Q&A was, what if someone sends a nude picture of me to someone else without me giving permission for them to do it? Is that legal? And Amy, maybe if you can speak a little bit more to the subject of sort of sexting and sending naked pictures, of individuals that are minors.
So it's not okay. The sharing of nude images or really any kind of images without someone else's consent it's not okay. And here in the state of Maryland, when we talk about sharing those types of images, that can be considered pornography. And it may also be considered distribution of pornography. So you need to keep those things in mind. One of the questions that was really great that I did see in the chat was, what do I do if someone sends me a nude image that I didn't ask for and I didn't want? And that's a great opportunity to tell a trusted adult, do not share that image any further. And please, please, anything that you can do to stop that sharing of those kinds of images, because imagine the way that that person must feel to have that image out there and be shared.
Thank you so much for sharing that answer. One of the other questions, and I addressed this earlier, is sort of the definitions around pornographies and just, sending naked pictures to each other consensually, that can get you into trouble criminally as well. I just want to be super clear about that. And not to get into the weeds of this, but the state law and the federal law are actually different. State law, talks about sexual activity between teens and, sort of these focus points. Federal law is much broader. And erotica and other things that aren't even nude pictures can be considered to be child pornography under federal law. And so I would just really caution everyone that people can get into a lot of trouble and it can really impact you down the road. And again, I'm going to sound a little bit more like a parent now, but the reality is all of this stuff on the internet lives forever. And it can impact you when you're looking for a job in the future, when you're trying to get into a school. People check the internet, they check Facebook, they check Instagram, they're looking for information on people, and it's all out there. Be so careful with what you share and what you share about yourself and your body. That's yours. And I just want to say, be super careful about all of that, because the criminal piece is one piece, and whether you can get into trouble with that, but the long lasting impact that it could have on you or what someone else might do with that information, the job thing, sure, but if someone else could use that information to hurt you, that can be really dangerous. So I just want to share that as well. Just got a good question about, how do you tell your parents that you've been sexually assaulted? What are the words? What can you say? And I'm going to flip that to Rafia and Colleen.
I think these aren't easy conversations to have, but I think, kind of speaking from an adult and a parent perspective, that parents really want to know if kids are having a hard time and if something has happened to you. I think sometimes saying it, as bluntly as, I was sexually assaulted or something happened to me that I'm not comfortable talking about and I need help too, might get you kind of the help that you need without saying explicitly what happened. So you could kind of rip the Band-Aid off, or you can ask for help and maybe not go into specifics and really try to say as much as you're comfortable with.
Also too, I can't say enough how therapy is so helpful. And that's also, the therapy is also a good tool in this situation as well. So if you are nervous about saying it, you can work with your therapist to role play it. You can even have the therapist present with you and invite your parent or parents to come to talk about this so that you have the support when you're doing this, because it's a very tough conversation to have.
And as we've mentioned throughout this presentation, if this is something that you want to talk about with someone through VASAP before you talk to your parents, you can do that too.
Absolutely.
You can have those conversations to help you figure out how to have those conversations. So just remember that too. And you can use those free text lines. You can reach out to Everymind and get the help and services that you need. Or talk to another trusted adult that it might be easier to talk to than your parents, and to navigate it that way.
There was a question in the chat too about if somebody's having anxiety, saying what happened to them, how they might go about things. And I think I want to kind of go back to the idea that at schools, if you talk to one of the school nurses or the school counselors, they can, you don't have to say what's happened, but you can ask if they can reach out to a VASAP therapist to come help. So that's kind of a way to get access to that support without kind of involving parents or anybody else that you're not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. And we just got a really good note in the Q. I think it was in the Q&A. I'm having trouble keeping track, but that the Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse also put in some information about texting instead of calling for support. Loveisrespect.org has a crisis text option. Text love is to 22522, and you can chat with them that way or on their website. And I'm putting that, I just put that in the chat. I just put that answer. So thank you for that. Really appreciate it. A couple of other questions that we have, and this is about sort of the criminal justice piece. First question was, is there a time limit to reporting? The answer is no. No, there is no time limit. There's no statute of limitations on reporting a felony. I will tell you that if something happens to you when you're a juvenile and the offender, the person that did it, is also a juvenile, once everyone becomes an adult, most crimes that happen when you're kids, you can't, it sort of ends, the time period that you can prosecute someone kind of ends when they turn 18, 19, 20, or 20, 21. But if, you know, but really, if you're reporting something that another juvenile did to you, don't hesitate to report without worrying about that part. But the bottom line is there's no limitation on reporting. There's no limitation on getting services. If something happens to you when you're 15 and you're 40 and you want to get help, this county is here and available to give you help, even if it's about something that happened to you when you were 15 years old. And that goes for sexual assault, it goes for child abuse, sexual child abuse. And sexual child abuse, there really is no limitation on prosecution for those. If something happened to you when you were a child and you're now an adult, or something happened to you now that you're not ready to tell, there's no limitation on our ability time-wise to prosecute. Now, there was a question about what if someone, you know, what if there's no DNA or no physical evidence? I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of our cases don't have DNA or physical evidence.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. But that is not a barrier to going forward in the criminal justice system. Every case is different. Every set of facts is different. It's really important. You know, I know it can be hard to tell people. The sooner you tell someone, look, the easier it is for us to gather evidence and information. But that doesn't have to be a barrier. Gathering accurate information, truthful information to the best of your recollection is going to be what guides us down that path. I don't know if Amy or Rafia or Colleen, if you want to add to that.
No, I think.
Okay. Okay. Another question here, and this was a good question. This also plays into, you know, there's a couple of questions that are kind of similar. And this really is along the lines of, there was a type of rape that I was talking about that involved not only intoxicated individuals, but also individuals that may have cognitive differences or disabilities, mental disabilities. And then there was a specific question about what if someone is autistic or nonverbal? Can they consent? And I think in that type of an instance or that type of a situation, there would have to be a way to communicate consent in order for there to be consent. And, you know, we've had cases where individuals that are nonverbal have communicated to us through other devices or things that they use to communicate with others in the world. And it may not be verbal, but there are ways to communicate. So the bottom line is, if someone can't communicate consent, there can't be consent. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a verbal. If someone is nonverbal, then that may not be an option for them. So there may be other ways to communicate consent, but that's going to have to be very carefully and deliberately thought out and worked out. So if you're engaged in a relationship or a sexual relationship with someone that's nonverbal, I think you need to probably engage some resources and have some conversations with some adults to get some support around that. As hard as that might be, I just want you to make sure that you're safe and that the individual that you're engaging with is safe. And then that goes back to this question of that we also got, which is around what sort of mental disabilities are we talking about? And really, it's when we're talking about that part of the statute, we're talking about someone that's not able to give consent. They may be, that they're not able to give consent, that there are barriers to them being able to give consent. And that is where we're talking about when there may be a mental health issue. So for example, someone that is, having an emotional breakdown and they're in a very, very vulnerable place and they aren't able to sort of help themselves at all, or they may be someone that is in a dangerous situation given their mental health. Those are going to be situations where their ability to consent, because their ability to sort of do anything is compromised, if you will. Frankly, we're not talking about things like if someone suffers from anxiety or depression, if they're able to articulate consent, if they're able to have those conversations, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about situations where someone is not able to articulate or give that type of consent. I don't know if anyone has anything to add to that. Okay.
Demi, I think you covered it.
Yes. Okay. So there's also a question here. Even if you were to say yes, what if you didn't want to do it? Does that count? And again, that goes back to something I was talking about earlier, which is if there's a power and control dynamic, or if there's a size differential, or if someone's will is overcome, or if you're scared, or maybe if the week before the person threatened you into having sex with them and said, I'm going to hurt you if you don't do this with me. And then comes the next week, they don't make the same threat, but you're still afraid because of what they said before. And they have the ability to do that. So if you say yes, but you feel like you're coerced, or you're afraid of something happening to you, that's not consent either. So there was a question also about what is coercion. Amy, do you want to take that one? What is coercion?
Trying to think of the easiest way to explain it, Debbie. It's really using some type of language or action to convince someone to do something that they probably didn't really want to do to begin with. So when we talk about consent and coercion, if you are involved in some type of activity with someone, like let's say you wanted to go get ice cream, and the person that you're with says, hey, let's not do that. Let's go to Burger King instead. And they try to give you some type of reason to go to Burger King as opposed to doing what you want to do, which is to just go get ice cream, right? It's sort of like that same idea. It really goes back to the tea video. If yes means yes, I definitely do want some tea. But someone else is trying to convince me when I say, no, I don't want tea anymore, that really I do want tea, that can be considered coercion.
I also wanted to add to what we're talking about is that when a person's in a situation where there's possible trauma or something scary happening, the brain responds in a few different ways. One, people fight, right, to get away. Sometimes people run away. And there's another response that a lot of people don't talk about, and it's when people freeze. For example, like you see a deer in the road when you're driving and it stops and you're like, why doesn't it keep running? I'm going to hit it. It's because it's afraid. It freezes. So sometimes when survivors are in a situation, that is a response that they have. So there's no way that they can say anything but lay there still. That is not consenting. So that's one thing I just wanted to add to what we've kind of been talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good point. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And there was actually a question that I was just taking a look at that said, what if someone keeps forcing you to do things, and every time you're together they bring it up and you keep saying no, they get upset, but next time you guys are together they bring it up again and you say yes, so they'll stop asking. Is that okay? No. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. It has to be a voluntary consent. Yes. Now, could we prove that in criminal court? Those are always different questions. But the question of whether it's okay or whether it's if you're coerced or forced into saying rape, that's never okay. But I would suggest under those scenarios, maybe not hang out with that person anymore. That's probably a best course of action. Easy for me to say. I get it. It's totally easy for me to say, but it's just something to think about. There's also some questions about, is it even possible for men to get raped? And do we see females as rapists? Yes, we do. Not only in same gender couples, but also women on men. We see that. And how is it possible for a man to get raped? Well, as we've described, there are multiple definitions of rape in Maryland. It not only includes, vaginal intercourse, it also includes other types of intercourse, and also includes oral sex and other types of penetration. So, I don't want to get completely graphic, but penetrating a man, somewhere else with something, that is rape. Putting something in their butt, let me be clear. Okay, so there, I said it. That's rape, against their will sexually, without their consent. Forcing someone to have sex with you. We've seen cases where someone, a man has gotten aroused, but they didn't want to do it, and they've been forced to have vaginal intercourse. But their body may have responded in a particular way, even though mentally they didn't want to do it. And they're still allowed not to want to do it, to say, to not say yes, to say no, and that can still be considered rape. I've seen some nodding heads from my co-panelists. Does anyone want to add to what I was describing with respect to this dynamic, that it's not only just, men that are rapists? I would also add, obviously, we've talked about sort of these different gendered couples, and I spoke a little bit earlier about sort of situations where someone's non-binary, or where you have same sex or same gender couples or same interested couples. I'm going to probably say it all wrong, and I probably don't have the lingo, down exactly perfectly, but basically, the reality of what rape is doesn't matter what your gender is, what your sexual orientation is, what your sexual identification is. None of that matters. It comes down to consent, which is the purpose of tonight. It comes down to the affirmative yes. Anyone can be raped. Anyone can be raped. It doesn't matter what any of those differences are. The hard parts are talking about it, getting that information out there, and getting help. Because if you're someone that has been sexually assaulted, as we talked about earlier, can be incredibly devastating, and you can be afraid, and you can be fearful, and you may be ashamed, and you blame yourself. I'm going to say again what I said earlier. It is not your fault. And any of that shame, I'm not saying that those aren't real feelings. I'm saying that there is help that is available, and people to help you that will never judge you, and will never question you, and will never blame you. Some of them are on this screen tonight. There are many more resources in this county that can help you as well. And we would encourage you to get that help, to ask these important questions, to have these conversations, to make this a regular conversation amongst your peers, to have these conversations about how this, unconsented to touching is never okay. These casual slaps or touches, walking down the hallway, smacking someone's butt, or, grabbing someone's breast or whatever, never okay. Your body is yours, and no one should touch it without your permission.
And to add to what Debbie's saying, because I work with all the different departments in the county that service victims, from the police department, the state's attorney's office, the FJC, the hospital, the counselors at MCPS, teachers. And there's one message that we really want to say, is that when you do reach out for help, we're going to start by believing you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every time. And I think, there was a question about confidentiality in reporting, and I don't know if everyone can kind of just speak quickly from their agency's perspective about the confidentiality. I think particularly, maybe Rafi and Colleen, you can start.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about the VAWA Act. It's a Violence Against Women's Act. And this act actually funds rape crisis centers, domestic violence programs, any programs that help women that are crime victims. It started in 1994, and here are some of the things that it kind of protects. One, it holds a higher level of privacy, right, than even HIPAA. There's all kinds of regulations about how your health information is protected when you go for help. Also, too, there's some help in regards to immigration relief. If you are a victim of a crime and there's some immigration issues, VAWA has protections to help with immigration status. I just want to make sure I hit them all. Some newer things too, it's been built in the VAWA law to help getting some of these untested rape kits processed. So there's also some written protections around kits and testing for evidence and things like that. I don't know if anybody has anything else to add.
I think I just want to stress that the law protects it, and then our programming and therapists who work with people who have been sexually assaulted really respect it and understand that it's a huge part of the trauma recovery, that things go at your pace, and that you share only what you're comfortable with. So I think, you know, even if you want to go get a rape kit or an STD kit test, you can do that as a Jane Doe and not have your identity revealed until you're ready to deal with that. So there are kind of medical protections to make sure that you're safe, but also particularly around counseling and trauma counseling after the fact. We're working really hard to make sure that things go at the person's pace and that they're only shared with that person's consent. So it could be that you want to talk in therapy about how you're going to report it to your parents or how you're going to report it to the police, or if you want to take those next steps. And that's part of recovering from trauma, is working out what you're ready for and when you want to do that.
Debbie, I would also like to add regarding immigration status, because we did get a couple of questions about immigration status. And I want to emphasize that here in Montgomery County, you will not be asked by the police or any of our other county agencies about your immigration status when you seek services. That includes reporting a crime. It includes going to VASAP and having a conversation with a counselor or seeking any other type of services. Montgomery County will not ask you about your immigration status.
Thank you all. There was actually a couple more questions that I want to answer, and then we will be posting the very long awaited SSL QR code and email address for those of you that are not MCPS students. One of the questions was what if the person that the perpetrator, what if the rapist doesn't live here? The rape happened here in Montgomery County, but the person lives out of the state or out of the country or out of the area. Doesn't matter. If the crime happened here, the crime happened here, and it should be reported, and then we will follow up. We bring people in from around the world to prosecute them when they've caused different crimes. There are different methods to do that. I won't go into it. The bottom line is report it, get the information that you need to help yourself, get services if you don't want to report it to the police, and that's all okay. One of the other questions was about the ages of consent, and also the different ages where rape is considered to be statutory versus not statutory. So I want to just go over that really quickly. And if you're asking those questions, you're probably a future lawyer and you want to know sort of all of the different categories that I've had to, you know, memorize as a part of my job. But here they are. Second degree rape, if the person who's being raped is under the age of 14 and the perpetrator is 4 or more years older, it doesn't matter whether there's consent or not. You can't consent if you're under the age of 14 and the perpetrator is 4 or more years older than you, period. That's rape. That's statutory rape. If the victim is 14 or 15 years old and the person rapes them, and the perpetrator is 4 or more years older than the 14 or 15-year-old, it's not considered under the law to be a rape. That's not what it's called. It's called a third degree sexual offense. It is still a felony. It is still very, very serious. The age of consent is 16 with an asterisk. If you are related to the person, if they're a family member, if they're a household member, if they are someone that supervises you, if they are a teacher, if they are a coach, If there's someone that is, supervising you in any way, has care or custody of a child, a 17-year-old and a 35-year-old coach, illegal, sexual abuse of a minor. So keep all of that in mind. If there are these power and control dynamics, and it's a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old, it can be sexual abuse of a minor, and that's just based on the age difference. So keep that in mind. We've spent most of the evening tonight talking about sexual assault between people that are of the age where if there was consent, it would not be illegal. But there are these certain categories where it's 100% illegal, based on age alone, if you're particular of the young age or the older age. And there was just a question that popped in: what if you're 1 month from being 18? Too bad. If you can't, and it can be sex abuse of a minor if something happens, with someone in a position of authority. So there's also other crimes related to that, but I won't go into the litany. But if you're interested in learning more, we could do a whole presentation on all of the different laws and how they apply and give you examples. The bottom line is, and I want to sort of end here because we have 2 more minutes, we're going to pop up. And actually, as I'm talking, Smitha, if you could put up the long-awaited SSL Hour QR code, scan away, get that information. While you're doing that, I just want to put in a last plug for our Choose Respect programs. If there is a program that you want to bring to your school or to your program or your team or your anything, let us know. If you want it, we will build it if we don't have it, and we will bring it to you. So please, reach out to us, use us as resources. Oh no, where'd the QR code? I saw it just for a second.
I know, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get it up.
Okay, we're working on it. I just want to take a quick moment to offer some thank yous while we're working on that. I want to thank Montgomery County Public Schools for having the idea to do this. This was something that they asked Choose Respect to do because they felt like there was a need. And I'm going to say there are close to 1,000 of you on this webinar tonight. We maxed out at 1,000. So if you have friends that wanted to participate, we can do this again. If there are other programs that you're interested in, check out our website. We can do additional programs. We can work out SSL hours for participation in our programs. Our event in March, SSL hours are going to be available for that. Participating in the PSA contest, SSL hours are going to be available for that. I want to say a huge thank you to Smitha Varia from the Family Justice Center, the program manager for the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, who helped put all this together tonight, presented this evening, to my colleagues and panelists, Captain Amy Dom from the Police Department, Dr. Rafia Prince and Colleen Brockman from Trauma Services. We are privileged in this county to have such a wealth of support and compassionate people that care about this issue. This is probably the wrong thing to say, but I'm going to say take advantage of us. Use these services. We are here to help and to support you. No one should be alone. I'm going to leave with 2 last things. If you're a victim of sexual assault or sexual abuse, it is never your fault. And yes means yes. Get to the affirmative yes. Thank you so much for your time this evening. We're going to leave the last slide up for another couple of minutes so we can make sure that everyone can access it. Send that email address you're seeing on the screen. That is another way to get more information. If you want more information after tonight, or you want to learn more about our programs, email Smitha. We want her to get inundated with emails and requests and things. And we also have programs for parents, and we have programs for adults on sexual assault. So if you're a teacher or a parent or youth service provider on this and you want more information or more programming, please reach out to us. And please, create those videos, students. I know that some of you are putting in the chat and the question answer that you want a form. You can, scanning this QR code is going to get you to the form. If you have a problem, send an email to Smitha and we'll make sure that we get you what you need. Okay.
Yes, and
thank you too, Debbie. Thank you too, Debbie.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
And I just wanted to also say that I will not be emailing the SSL Hour form out because we don't have a full list of the participants. So please note the SSL Hour bit.ly link or the QR code. If you have any issues with getting the SSL Hour form, please email me. My email is the one that's in the blue, smitha.varia@montgomerycountymd.gov. And I wanted to say a special thank you to Debbie, to Dr. Prince, to Captain Dom, and Colleen Bachman for all of your wonderful answers. And we hope that you all came away with some prevention knowledge. And thank you all for joining.
And thank you to our ASL interpreters for joining this evening. And this recording will be available on our Choose Respect website. I also want to let you know that we can offer all of these programs in Spanish if that's an interest for folks too. So please let us know about that as well. And thank you and have a wonderful evening. Then we're going to leave that slide up for another couple minutes, but our screens are about to go dark. And thank you again for your participation.